Random notes video. I make a bunch of notes and I don't know where they came from. I had a to-do file that was like almost a megabyte across. I didn't even read it, I erased it. Part of getting things done, GTD, how to get things done, is if it can be done in 5 minutes, do it. And if you start tabling things infinitely, don't bother, you're not going to do them. Don't let them waste time in your mind or in your life. So I'm going to be reading a bunch of notes that I've probably done for a bunch of videos, but I'm just going to do them in one shot and see how fast we can do them. It's fun, mostly because I might not have covered those. This was an attempt here in this file that's called A, to attempt to make a singularity video of all the gun laws in the United States. And then it breaks down to rules of thumb and doing best practices, and eventually me explaining to people, here's how to do things ideally. Not what you can get away with, but what you can do that will make it to where it doesn't look like you're trying to get away with something. But here we go. The first thing in the file is a video of the Henry AR-7. Someone asked me to talk about it, and I never really got down to doing so. Double action mechanisms I've been kind of obsessed with recently until I found out that all of them are based on the same basic principle. Double action, if you're not aware of it, is you pull a trigger and it does two things. That's really what it means. I mean, in effect, it may not be the correct definition, but that's really the effective definition. When you pull the trigger, it doesn't just fire the gun. It usually does all of the processes to fire it. A completed cycle of pulling the trigger and releasing means that you can just pull the trigger and fire it again and release it, and it'll do all of them, or most of them. It may only be firing the one round it has, or it may be incrementing or firing them in every way. A manually driven gun that auto-reloads, or more accurately, it's not auto-reloading. It'll be a cylinder type thing like, it could be anything. And yes, there are auto-loaders that do not use blowback. They just use the mechanics of your hand to do it. And they're this weird thing where auto-reloaders and auto-loaders are considered only to be that if they use some of the energy from the propellant. So there's a whole other class of it doesn't do that. It acts like an old school gun where you had to manually do everything. You're just doing it through one button. Anyway, it's gotten to the point that you can make one that does most of these functions in 3 or 4 parts, if you do it right. Next, firearms glossaries and that sort of stuff. ATF folded brace redacted page where they were talking about they're going to make rules about changes and innovations in guns, like making them fold or dismantle or break down. Guns that can be taken apart are very, very old ideas because guns are long and skinny, and sometimes it's more efficient to make things box-shaped. This goes down to people making guns where the entire barrel and the entire back end of it come loose and you can just change the parts. Also, just guns you can quickly alter and repair. But let's talk about all this other stuff in the listing here. The term any other weapon was originally a very vague and broad thing. And that's actually more precise now. Defined as to include any weapon or device capable of being concealed on the person from which a shot can be discharged through the energy of an explosive. And then they addendum with, and it has to use conventional ammunition. It shall not include a pistol or revolving having a rifled bore. A pistol or revolver having a rifled bore is fine. If it's a smooth bore and it uses cartridges, it's any other weapon. So literally, if it's a short-barreled shotgun, blah, blah, blah. Now, any other weapons are only $5 taxes. This allowed you to get away with making something that is under 26 inches, is a pistol grip gun, has a short barrel on it, and you're deliberately making it smooth bore, or trying to keep you from doing it. Yeah, but it's only a $5 tax. It's $200 if you do something that everybody would recognize as being a rifle, but you just don't like it, so you make a bunch of rules about it. The ATF is kind of screwy. Pistol is defined as a weapon originally designed or intended to fire a projectile from one or more barrels, but held in one hand. If you make it to where it's pistol grip, but you don't fire it from a shoulder, it's not really a pistol, it's not really a shotgun or a rifle, they refer to it only as a firearm. A weapon originally designed, made, and intended to fire a projectile held in one hand only would be the pistol. If a firearm has an overall length of less than 26 inches, it places it into the category of arms that could be considered to be regulated depending on other characteristics entirely, if it has certain characteristics. The ATF had to juggle a bunch of definitions instead of saying, if we don't like it, it's excluded. Just ban things. Tell us what's banned, and if we build something like it, is it a problem? And all of these exclude the idea of you doing something that doesn't use cartridge ammunition. If you use a muzzle loader or any non-cartridge gun, or if you only use a primer and a projectile that are separate in hand, it's not against the rules. That's why you can have a full-on cannon that can literally take out an entire bus full of people. It's not illegal because you can only fire it once. It can't be fast reloaded. The implication has to be how effective the gun is. If a gun is really effective but you haven't broken the law, then people want to ban it anyway. If it has an overall length of 26 inches or longer, you're good to go in most cases, as long as it has, even if it has a smooth bore. But it has to have a barrel length of a certain length, etc. A firearm that was originally a rifle would be classified as a weapon made from a rifle if it was made from a rifle, or if it has either a barrel less than 16 inches in length or an overall length less than 26 inches. If you wish to make one, you must first submit an ATF form and pay a tax of $200 for any of these. Or you can just make one that doesn't require the tax, or just not tell them and do it illegally. What they don't know can't hurt you, except if you get caught with it. And that's kind of a problem, obviously. Obviously, if something started off being a shotgun and you convert it into a pistol, if you convert it literally to a pistol, if you make it fit the definition, it's not illegal. If you make something start off as a pistol grip receiver with no other parts to it, or a blank receiver that can be used for hundreds of different weapons, it is not regulated until you start turning it into something, and the least regulated one is the pistol, because you can allow it, depending on the barrel length, to be smoothbore or rifled. They don't care. You can make it short, and it's a pistol, and if you make it longer than a certain distance, make it into a firearm. Don't put a buttstock on it. And yes, you can convert them back and forth. A license is not required to make a firearm solely for personal use. However, a license is required to manufacture, for sale, firearms for sale or distribution. The law prohibits a person from assembling non-sporting semi-automatic rifle or shotgun from parts that are imported, 10 or more of them. Just don't import the parts. I'm not kidding. It's real easy. But you can copy an imported part or just start from scratch and make it yourself. Firearms that cannot be detected by metal detectors or x-ray machines are also excluded. There has to be some ability to detect them. You can't be making a concealed weapon that is easily concealed under conditions that you would need to x-ray or metal detect. By making an NFA firearm, this requires a tax payment, and you have to get approval before building it. I could contact the ATF and say, hi, I want, just an open-ended question, I want to build a 12-gauge flare gun, but according to your rules, I either need you to give me an exemption and call it a flare gun and not charge me anything, charge me $5 because at that point it would definitely be in any other weapon at bare minimum, or $200 to build it. And I need approval first. I need to know whether you're going to let me do it as an AOW instead, because I don't want to pay $200 to build a flare gun. And they might say, if you do these restrictions, that sort of thing. I have not gotten a response for them because I did an RFC, RFI, and no response. They don't have to. It's not required. I haven't paid them a tax for it, and I'm not making a serious inquiry. I'm making an informational request. And they can delay that as long as they need to because they can get inundated very easily with Questions. You'd be surprised how often that happens. And they have to answer each and every one of them in time, or they have to say, we don't know, or they won't respond. They may lose it. Next, air gun. For some reason, there's a note about a Japanese Fuki Dake. It's a diameter, 120 centimeters or 47 inches long, 13 millimeter or 51 caliber, 17 millimeter, 68 caliber paintball guns, paintball markers. That other one, that first one, is very similar to the flare gun, inner diameter, blah blah blah, and also at 51 caliber, that's 50 BMG territory. US EU modern diameter IFA sanctioned competition shooting, 48 inch or 121 centimeter 10 millimeter or 40 caliber and 13 millimeter 50 caliber or 16 millimeter 62 caliber are air guns and paintball markers. Oh, okay, I was looking up the various diameters that are used for non-firearms that are regulated by sporting competitions. Okay. And or air guns that fire larger calibers or larger objects. Interesting. I have some links there. Don't know what they go to, but okay, cool. I do know, if you're not aware of it, paintballs and pellet guns and Nerf all use calibers as well. Like 60-something caliber is a paintball. There's a 50 caliber that's also not, 50 BMG, but it's just Nerf. They use common diameters because that's what was available to make the tubing out of and was a practical design consideration for making something work. Paintball markers originally, if you weren't aware of it, were used to mark cattle with a bright colored spot so you knew which one had to be dealt with a different way, just for whatever purpose. Common definition of a firearm is that it's a weapon, but the word weapon is forbidden. It carries an evil boomstick connotation, and not all weapons go boom, and is only used by those opposing gun rights in favor of gun control. No. Civilian household firearms, said no one, are firearms, not weapons. Military firearms are weapons. Yeah, this is some comment someone left somewhere. That doesn't make any sense. I think I already did that in a video, but let's emphasis added here. Playing word games is bad. A gun is a weapon. There's no Evil Dead boomstick. Shop smart. Shop S-Mart. Neanderthals. Anyway, here we go. United Kingdom Firearms Act 1968. The year I was born. Bans the manufacture of guns and gun parts without government approval. It has to be government sanctioned. Legally, under U.S. federal law, a license or background check is not required to make or possess a gun if you do not sell or give it away and you made it. The ATF looks at this as a loophole in some people's opinion. Other people don't. I'd like a definitive response from them, and if that's their opinion, I want them dissolved. If we're allowed legally to do something and we're following law, it's not a fucking loophole. And it wasn't actually created from some sort of legal conundrum. There just wasn't a reason to make it illegal. If you make something that you could legally buy, and there's no requirement in the United States on a national level to register a pistol or shotgun or rifle at all. If you're in the city of Portland, Oregon, if I make a gun, a specific type of gun specifically, I have to register it. And the fucked up part is if I get a cap gun, a really loud cap gun basically, a blank gun, they actually have more restrictions on the cap gun than buying a real gun or making one. They only wanted to regulate the thing they found to be pesky. And they found out that people with blank firing guns were more of a pain in the ass. Classifying engaging in the business of manufacture or sale of multiple firearms as an activity that requires an appropriate federal firearms license, FFL, and compliance with legal and regulatory requirements for markings and serial numbers. I have no problem with that. I'm not in that business. If I was in that business, I could apply for it and go ahead and do so. But they want you to have an address. However, there are people who roll around in a van. They just have a fixed abode for a business name, and the business becomes a federal firearms licensee, and they maintain it, and they go around the country doing gunsmithing, but their main address is like in Miami, Florida, or wherever. The FBI does not regularly track the use of homemade firearms because they can't. It's also kind of it's not really a loophole. It's them acknowledging, along with the ATF, that you can't. That would be a contradiction in terms. If you don't require that they put markings on them or register them, you can't check them out. And in the few occurrences where a state has allowed people to do this, they then went through and demanded them back. They actually did not do a gun buyback. They demanded you surrender them. Nobody did. FedEx, UPS refused to transport computer numerical control or CNC milling machines if they're branded Ghost Gunner because they don't want people making guns by robot. That's about it for that. I'll do another video for more junk. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that.